To wrap up this module on mandated disclosures, a couple more topics here. One is something called stigmatized properties. So what's a stigmatized property? Or what's a stigma? And it says that would be a property that may have or may be psychologically affected. In other words, something has happened either in or around the property that for many people might be a significant issue. I mean, to the point where not only am I not buying it, I'm not even going to look at it. It's just a psychological issue that some people may have. Just the main thing to understand here is with stigmatized properties, it doesn't mean anything is wrong with the property. It just means something happened in or around the property that may scare some buyers away. Okay? So when we're dealing with mandate disclosures, remember, we're dealing with material facts, things of that nature, defects, things that have to be disclosed. So do you have to disclose a stigma that might surround a particular property? And the answer is no. So for example, probably one of the most common stigmas is if a buyer finds out that someone died in the house. You know, for a lot of people, that would be a significant issue. Again, people find out somebody died in the house, they might say, well, I'm not buying that house, not even going in the house. Well, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with the house. It doesn't mean somebody died there, but there's nothing wrong with the house. You know, there's nothing in or about the house that caused the death of whoever died there. So that's considered a stigma. Well, do you have to disclose, say for example, if you list a house for sale and someone died in the house, do you have to disclose that to buyers? And obviously the answer is no. You do not have to disclose stigmas. And I think one of the primary reasons for that is, because what's a stigma for one person may not be a stigma to somebody else. So how do you know if it's a stigma to this particular buyer? So the law has just said, you know what, then we're not going to require the disclosure of stigmas. Now, having said that, if the buyer asks you a specific question, in other words, they say, do you know if anybody died in this house? Now, if they ask you that, then now you have to answer that question. You can't, and you got to be honest about it. You cannot obviously lie about it. But if they don't ask, then you do not have to disclose the stigma. So, there's several different examples of stigmas, and you see some of them listed here. Obviously death. A homeowner had a virus or a disease. Say they had HIV. Well, do you have to disclose that? Well, not only no under this law, but there are other laws, probably HIPAA and so forth. You cannot disclose medical issues about another person. So no, you can't disclose that. First of all, people say, well, let me back up. Let me do. If the homeowner has HIV, for example, the medical profession has said today that you cannot contact or get HIV through casual contact. So you're certainly not going to get it by walking into a house where somebody living in the house already has that disease. They didn't get that disease by being in that house. So, that's considered a stigma, and it's certainly you do not have to. In fact, I'll tell you that you cannot disclose stuff like that because of other laws. Public information about the sex offender registry, which we're getting ready to talk more about that here in a little bit. Talking about sex offenders. But what if there was a major crime that was committed on the property, maybe resulted in deaths or whatever reason? Do you have to disclose that? When you get into stuff like that, the fact somebody died there, no, that does not have to be disclosed. But there could be other laws, depending on what market you're in, certainly, and depending on what state you live in. There may be other laws that might require you to disclose something like major crimes of some sort. So there is potential you would have to disclose a major crime. Again, depending on your market and obviously the state that you live in and what kind of laws have been adopted there. So just keep that in mind. So the main thing I would want you to know here is, first of all, make sure you know what a stigmatized property is. Do you have to disclose the known stigmas? And the answer is no, unless you're specifically asked. And I keep saying specifically asked. The reason I'm saying it this way, a buyer can't just say, Frankie, do you know if there's any stigmas associated with this property? That's not a fair question, because I don't know what a stigma is to you. I might know what it is to me, but I don't know what it is to you. So you can't ask me a question that broad. If you want to ask me, has somebody died in the home, then I'll answer, and so forth. Because that's a specific question, and then you have to answer it. But that's stigmatized properties. But then lastly, you need to be, if you're not already, I'd be surprised anybody's not aware of what we call Meagan's Law. Meagan's Law came about as a result of, it was a young couple years ago that bought a house unknowingly right next door to a sex offender. And this particular sex offender was one of the worst of the worst. And this couple had two small daughters, but one of them's name was Meagan Kanka. If I'm not mistaken, she's around 12, 13 years old. But she was abducted by this neighbor, the sex offender, raped and then killed her. And then, obviously that set off all kinds of anger across the country. So a law was passed, and obviously they named it after Meagan here, and they call it Meagan's Law. So what's the purpose here, and why does that matter to us? Every contract of sale should have this provision in the contract. But if it's not there in the particular contract you use, there is a form that you must have every buyer sign it. Basically, it's a disclaimer letting the buyer know. And basically what it's saying is this, and this is what you must tell every buyer. And the way I explain it and state it is just like this. Buyer, before you make any offers on any property, I need to let you know there are sex offenders everywhere. And I mean they are everywhere. If you're concerned, buyer, about the potential of a sex offender living anywhere near the property you're thinking about buying, then buyer, it's going to be your sole responsibility, not mine. It is your sole responsibility to go online, look up, search for the sex offender registry, and find out who's living in the area around you. I'll tell you, you pull up the sex offender registry and you can just type in your address, right where you live. I'd encourage you to do it if you haven't done it in a while. Type in your address and it will pull up every sex offender within however many miles or whatever parameters you put there. It'll pull them all up. And I think you're going to be awfully surprised at who all your neighbors are. Because I'm telling you, they're everywhere. Now, obviously, there's a very wide range of issues that people could have gotten in trouble with that would wind up putting them on the sex offender registry. Some of them, not nearly as dangerous as others. So you want to just take a look at what some of that stuff is. But y'all, Meagan's law basically requires that anybody convicted of a sex crime must be registered on the sex offender registry. So you'll be there, no matter how small an issue it was, right on up to the gravest of issues. Okay, so they'll all be listed there. Now, who keeps up with this registry and who enforces the registry? It's the local sheriff's department. I guarantee you that'll be a state exam question. And I would tell you, if you did not know that the local sheriff's department has jurisdiction over the sex offender registry, I promise you the other three options they'll have for you, you'd have probably picked any one of them three before you'd have picked the local sheriff's department. But the right answer is the local sheriff's department, so I would remember that. Now, a couple other things here to keep in mind. You have to disclose to buyers about their obligation to search the sex offender registry to make sure they're okay with who's living in or around this property. Do not look it up for your client. I'm telling you, you talking about liability. You're fixing to get yourself in a lot of trouble. So don't do it for your client, and for goodness sake, never ever print out a copy of the sex offender registry so that you can provide it to your clients to look at. When you do that, now they're going to be making decisions based on information you provided, and I'm telling you, they're sex offender, you might print it out today, but tomorrow you could have a dozen new sex offenders now living in this area, and now it's not on the printout that you provide, and you're going to get sued for that. So you do not print anything out. You do not look it up for your clients, but you must disclose to them that before making an offer on a house, you need to check the sex offender registry. And then again, there's a form. They need to sign off on this form acknowledging that you disclosed that to them. And then whether they want to go look it up or not, then that's up to them. But you told them. And so at that point, you've done your job.